He wakes up before the alarm, like clockwork, as if he's still orbiting some high-precision trajectory, only he's not navigating aerospace anymore. He's living in a family where he's become irrelevant. They laugh behind his back, steal without guilt, take his care for granted. They call him furniture, joke about his silence, lie openly, and don't even bother to hide it. But he's not asleep anymore. He sees it all. Every receipt, every photo, every message. A brick in the fortress he's building. Not for revenge, for truth. Because when the house you spent 20 years building was founded on lies, you don't tear it down in rage, you wait, and you set the fire only when you're sure not a single stone will survive. Just one question remains. Are they ready to face themselves without the filter of illusion? Because now, he's not just a husband, not just a father. He is the truth, stepping out of the shadows. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. Caleb Morgan stirred before dawn, 4:40 a.m. on the dot, as he always did, beating the alarm by a clean 15 minutes. Years in aerospace had tuned his body into a metronome. The house was motionless, unnervingly silent for what was once meant to be a family home. He glided into the kitchen on instinct, hands moving through familiar motions, building a sandwich, turkey, sourdough, extra mustard, never mayo. Apple slices aligned neatly like they mattered. No one thanked him for it anymore, but rituals like these weren't for acknowledgement. They were for survival. As the coffee maker sputtered to life, Caleb leaned on the cool stone countertop, gazing out at the backyard of their minimalist Pasadena home. Sharp lines, modern finishes, zero warmth. They'd closed on it 10 years ago, just after his Northrop promotion. The debt was nearly paid. The emptiness? Long since settled. Is the coffee ready? Jasmine appeared in the doorway, composed as ever. Her outfit was flawless. Tailored slacks, a silk blouse draping across her frame like it had been arranged by a stylist. Every strand of hair locked in place. Just finished brewing, he said, sliding a mug her way. I packed your lunch. She reached for the cup without a glance. I have a client lunch. He nodded quietly, his sandwich now irrelevant. Chloe's sleeping over again tonight, she added, her fingers flicking across her phone screen. Wedding prep. That makes 3 nights this week. She's getting married, Caleb. It's a big deal. Her tone turned pointed. But of course you wouldn't get that. If you had your way, we'd have gone to City Hall and called it good. The sting in her words was deliberate, a jab about their modest ceremony, more necessity than celebration. Before he could speak, footsteps pounded on the stairs. Chloe appeared mid-call, phone pressed tight to her ear. I already told you, the florist wants half the money by Friday. Not my problem. You figure it out. She hung up and snatched his coffee mug without so much as eye contact. Morning to you too, Caleb muttered. Chloe didn't answer. Her attention pivoted to Jasmine. Mom, we've got to finalize the seating today. Nathaniel's relatives are melting down over the tables. We'll get it sorted, Jasmine said, her voice warm, affectionate, so different from how she spoke to Caleb. Your dad was just leaving. Right, weren't you, Caleb? He checked his watch. Still 45 minutes to spare, but the dismissal was unmistakable. I'll grab my stuff. As he stepped down the hallway, Chloe's voice floated behind him, exaggerated and whispery. He's so boring. Just stands there like he's part of the furniture. Jasmine's laughter followed. Always has, like living with a hat stand. He didn't stop, didn't flinch, just walked. His phone buzzed, a distraction he welcomed. A new transaction flashed across the screen. Beverly Bridal, $7,000. His brow creased. He hadn't heard a word about the purchase. No dress discussion, no boutique trip, no heads up. Another unspoken decision, another reminder that life was happening around him, not with him. He slipped the phone into his pocket and made for the front door. "I'm heading out," he called. Neither Jasmine nor Chloe looked up. Later that morning, Rhea leaned on his office doorway, arms crossed, expression equal parts concern and restrained anger. Her no-nonsense bob framed a face that rarely held back. She was the last of the old guard, the only colleague who'd been there as long as he had. Years of proximity had turned her into the only person he truly trusted at work. "They don't even see you, do they?" she said, voice low. Caleb glanced up from his screen. "Maybe I'm overthinking it." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me a $6,000 charge for a wedding dress just appears and no one says a word? That's not imagination, Caleb." She stepped inside and closed the door, settling into the chair across from him. "How long have we been doing this?" 15 years. "And in 15 years, have I ever lied to you to make you feel better?" A small smirk appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Not once." "Then believe me when I say this. People push the ones they're sure won't push back." She leaned forward, voice soft but deliberate. "You've built a life so stable, so dependable, that they know you won't snap. You'll just keep swallowing it." Caleb pressed his fingers to his temples. "She's still my wife. Chloe's still my daughter." "And you're still a human being," Rhea replied. "Not some open checkbook with shoes." After she left, Caleb stared at his screen, but the numbers blurred, the blueprints smeared. On impulse, he opened his banking app. The transactions blurred together at first, then sharpened with clarity. The dress was only a sliver. There were meal charges from high-end restaurants he'd never stepped foot in. Hotel stays that didn't align with Jasmine's supposed trips to see her sister. Strange withdrawals, consistent and quiet, hiding beneath routine purchases. It hadn't been one explosive betrayal. It had been erosion. Slow, constant, unnoticed. Until now. Certain charges caught Caleb's attention. Lavish expenses listed under Chloe's name, surfacing at odd times when she'd claimed she needed money for textbooks or that her car had broken down. As he stared at the screen, his vision began to blur, a creeping unease settling in. This wasn't impulsive splurging, it was deliberate, and if this had been going on longer than he'd imagined, he had to dig further. So he did, going back through older financial statements, 5 years, then 10. The deception stretched so far back, it became impossible to trace its origin. It was like reaching into a well that never ended. Around him, the hum of laughter and the gentle chime of cutlery echoed through the high-end restaurant. Chloe had chosen one of the most sought-after venues in downtown LA for the wedding dinner, an exclusive spot that usually required months to get into. Yet somehow, she'd secured it. Caleb sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching his daughter soak up the attention. She was striking, a living echo of Jasmine with the same raven dark hair and sharp poised presence. But her gaze, cool, measuring, lacked all affection. Her voice, crisp and meticulously rehearsed, sliced through the air like fine wire. "Everyone should have a place card," she announced, weaving her way around the table with an elegant box in hand. "I made them all myself." Compliments murmured around the group as she passed out the elaborate name cards. Her fiancé, Nathaniel, watched her with open admiration. He had charm, polish, and an undeniable handsomeness. But when his eyes landed on Caleb, a faint chill passed through them. When Chloe reached her father, she set his card down wordlessly and moved along, not sparing him a glance. Caleb picked it up and flipped it over. It read, Caleb Morgan, underneath in smaller font, +1 optional. Conversation bubbled on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Eyes flicked toward him, then quickly away. Nathaniel's mother pressed her lips into a thin line, visibly unsettled. Across the table, Jasmine took a leisurely sip of her wine, a subtle smirk teasing the corner of her mouth just above the rim. Then Nathaniel's father spoke up, too loudly. "Chloe, darling, I think you might have made a mistake on Mr. Morgan's card." Chloe looked over with a soft, unreadable smile. "Did I?" She walked over, casually plucked the card from Caleb's hand, and blinked with mock innocence. "Oops, that one wasn't for you." She didn't bother replacing it. The quiet that followed was long enough to burn. Nathaniel's mother quickly steered the conversation back on course, filling the silence. The evening carried on, but Caleb sat frozen in place, wrapped in a quiet, suffocating humiliation. When it became socially acceptable to do so, he rose, offered a stiff smile, and exited the restaurant. Outside, beneath the glow of the city's lights, a hand grabbed his sleeve. "Caleb, wait!" His sister Lori stood there, her face tight with anger. She'd made the trip up from San Diego just for this evening. "You're finally seeing it, aren't you?" she asked, her tone razor sharp. "I don't want to get into this right now." "No," she snapped. "This is exactly the time." Her fingers clenched harder around his arm. "I've watched them walk all over you for years," she said, "and you've let them. That stunt Chloe pulled in there, that wasn't an accident. It was a calculated insult. And Jasmine, she enjoyed every second of it." Caleb turned toward the busy street, the blur of headlights and noise reflecting his turmoil. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to fight back. I want you to stop letting them treat you like you're invisible. It's time to wake up, Caleb." He gently pulled her hand off his arm. "I'll see you at home." He arrived before anyone else. The house felt cold, sterile despite the expensive decor. More museum than home. He went straight to his study and turned on the computer, but something Chloe had said months ago suddenly came rushing back. A stray comment she hadn't realized he'd overheard. "Mom's iPad keeps syncing with Dad's old one in the study. You should just text from your phone instead." He opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the forgotten tablet they'd purchased years ago. Dusty and untouched, but still connected to their shared family cloud. As soon as it powered on, the screen flickered to life, and notifications began flooding in. Texts, photos, calendar events, all under Jasmine's account. He tapped into the messages first. His heartbeat faltered. There it was. An ongoing conversation between Jasmine and someone named Vincent Langley, going back years. A fresh message had arrived just a few hours earlier. Vincent: "Dinner looked intense. Everything okay?" Jasmine: "Fine. Caleb's still in the dark. Like always." He kept scrolling. The deeper he went, the more the facade unraveled. Flirty exchanges, compromising photos, weekends away planned while he was stuck working late or traveling on business. It got worse. Some messages involved Chloe. Jasmine: "Chloe can cover for me Friday. Caleb thinks I'm out with the girls." Vincent: "Smart girl, got your instincts." Jasmine: "In all the ways that count." His fingers shook as he opened the photo gallery. Image after image, spanning years. Jasmine and Vincent together in hotel rooms, on sun-drenched beaches, laughing in places Caleb had never even known she'd visited. Then one video stopped him cold. Chloe was behind the camera, holding up her phone. She stood in what looked like a beach house, panning slowly across the room. In the background, Vincent held a drink, grinning. Chloe's voice laughed off-screen. "The real MVP?" Caleb stood frozen, his entire being still as if turned to stone, while the truth around him came crashing down like a condemned structure. The life he'd poured himself into, the family he had sacrificed so much to protect, had been nothing more than a carefully scripted mirage, a quiet betrayal disguised as a routine existence. With meticulous precision, he began to compile it all. Every image, every message, every shred of evidence that revealed the hidden narrative playing out behind his back. His face remained unreadable as the files slowly opened. There would be time for feelings later. For now, only the truth counted. "You're sure about this?" asked Eli Tennyson. His voice lowered even in the quiet shadows of the backroom bar they'd chosen to stay out of sight. Caleb nodded once, firmly, sliding a USB drive across the table without saying a word. After nearly 30 days of silent investigation, he'd finally turned to the one person he still had faith in, his oldest friend, now working as a paralegal at one of Los Angeles's most cutthroat divorce firms. "It's all on there," Caleb said. "Every financial trail. Cards, wire transfers, emails, photos. 20 years of lies." Eli took the drive and tucked it into his coat pocket. Though a few years younger than Caleb at 35, Eli's eyes carried the weary weight of someone who had witnessed far too many marital implosions. "So, what's your move?" he asked carefully. "I need to understand my legal position," Caleb said, taking a deliberate sip of his whiskey. "She used my identity to open accounts, committed fraud, maxed out cards I never authorized. And of course, there's the affair." "California doesn't care about infidelity," Eli reminded gently. "I'm not trying to win points in court," Caleb said, voice cool and even. "I'm trying to make sense of 20 years I thought I understood." Eli gave him a measured look. "You've changed. The Caleb I remember would have kicked the door in the second he figured it out." "That guy," Caleb said, his tone stripped of warmth. "He was a fool. Thought trust meant something." Later that night, Caleb walked into the 24-hour gym he'd joined a week ago. By 10 p.m., the place was nearly deserted. He changed quickly, then moved straight to the weights, throwing himself into a punishing workout. Each rep bit into his muscles, burning with purpose, sharpening his focus against the rising tide of grief and fury. An older man nearby, stocky, with graying hair and years of discipline behind his frame, nodded in approval as Caleb finished a set. "Good form," the man said. "New around here?" "Just signed up," Caleb replied. "Let me guess, divorce or existential meltdown?" the man asked with a half-smile, clearly amused by Caleb's startled reaction. "I've been training people for 3 decades, he added. "I can usually tell." "That obvious?" "Only if you know what to look for. Name's Derek." "Caleb." Derek shook his hand. "Well, Caleb, whatever storm you're riding out, these weights don't play favorites. They're honest." For the first time in weeks, something in Caleb settled. "That's what I'm looking for," he said. "Something that doesn't lie." The next morning, on the way to work, he stopped at a pharmacy and paid in cash for a DNA test kit. That evening, he dug through the drawers in the guest bathroom until he found one of Chloe's old hairbrushes. He carefully extracted a few strands with follicles intact and sealed them inside the envelope. He wasn't guessing anymore. He was after proof. The brunch had been Jasmine's idea, a warm-up to the wedding, she'd called it. Just family and close friends. Their house had been chosen for the occasion, and the catering was a preview of the full reception spread. Caleb had replied yes to the invite, but never intended to show up. Instead, he spent his morning helping Rhea move her son into his first apartment. He carried boxes, hauled furniture, and put in sweat for something that felt real, tangible. As they collapsed onto the porch steps to rest, sipping cold drinks, Rhea gestured toward his phone. "You've been buzzing like crazy," she noted. Caleb checked the screen. 6 missed calls from Chloe, 3 from Jasmine, dozens of texts, growing more aggressive the further he scrolled. 8 voicemails. The screen lit up again. Chloe. He answered with calm, calculated ease. "Where are you?" she snapped, voice seething. "Everyone's here. Mom's livid. Nathaniel's family is confused." "Hope the champagne's good," Caleb said flatly. "I paid for it." Then he ended the call and turned off the phone. Rhea raised an eyebrow at him. "Everything all right?" "Just setting boundaries," he replied. That evening, Caleb found himself alone at a downtown wine bar, a glass of Cabernet in hand. his thoughts circling like hawks over a battlefield. A woman brushed against his table as she passed, almost spilling her drink. "Oh, my bad," she said, steadying herself. "These heels should be illegal." "No harm done," Caleb said, noticing the tipsy tilt in her posture and the flushed hue on her cheeks. She squinted at him for a moment. "Wait, I know you. Morgan, right? Chloe's father?" Caleb straightened in his seat. "And you are?" "Arden Nash." "I'm the wedding planner," she said, motioning toward the empty seat beside him. "Mind if I sit?" Caleb was still upright, worn down but steady when Arden swept through the door and collapsed into the nearest chair with a theatrical sigh. "Your daughter's brunch wore me out," she said, tossing off her heels with a wince. "Thanks for skipping, by the way." He acknowledged her with a civil nod, though his eyes were distant. "Rough day? You could call it that." She reached for her drink and took a generous sip. "Your girl? She's got very specific ideas about everything." "But maybe that's no surprise. Jasmine always did have a flair for control. You two worked together before, right?" "Quite a few years," Caleb said, voice low. Arden leaned in, her voice dropping with it. "Well, your wife and her companion figured you wouldn't cause a scene. They banked on you being too polished for that. Honestly, it was a smart bet. No drama, no fallout. Makes my job a breeze." She suddenly stiffened, glass halfway to her lips. Her face paled. "Wait, that didn't come out right." Caleb gave a measured smile. "Relax, Arden. You look like you could use another." Her expression faltered into remorse. "Mr. Morgan, I'm truly sorry. I assumed you already knew. They talk like it's nothing when you're not around. I figured, start from the beginning," he said, motioning to the bartender. By the time Arden climbed into her Uber a couple of hours later, Caleb sat with more than enough. More than he'd ever imagined. Weekend trips that didn't check out. Business dinners that Vincent somehow always attended. And then, the most painful thread. Chloe. At first, unknowingly entangled. Later, fully drawn in. The worst part, Arden had whispered, eyes glassy, is how they laugh about it. Like it's some private joke. "I've planned a lot of weddings, Mr. Morgan. I've seen my share of dysfunction. But the way they talk about you." Her words had withered in the air, unfinished. Caleb had gone home with a strange sense of calm. The puzzle was assembling itself, the snare tightening without his help. 10 days later, a thick envelope arrived via express courier, exactly the one he'd been waiting for. He carried it to his study, shut the door, and opened it with careful hands. The report inside was clinical. Blood markers, percentages, scientific coldness. But the message it carried struck like thunder. Chloe Morgan wasn't his daughter, not by blood. Caleb stared at the paper, expecting anguish. None came. Maybe deep down he'd known. Maybe betrayal had hollowed him so thoroughly that nothing else could reach him. Or maybe, just maybe, after 26 years, love didn't rely on DNA. He filed the envelope into a locked drawer, just one more tile in the mosaic. That night, he met Rhea for their usual quiet dinner, a ritual that had grown into something easy and essential over the last month. "You're quieter than usual," she said, sliding him the last of the tagliatelle. "Something happen?" The test results came in. Rhea froze, fork suspended. "And she's not mine, at least not genetically." She set her utensil down and gently reached for his hand. "Caleb, I'm so sorry." "No need. It only confirmed what I already guessed." "So what now?" she asked softly. "When will you confront them?" Caleb took a measured sip of water. "You don't strike a match until every inch of the house is soaked in gasoline." She studied him. "That doesn't sound like the Caleb I used to know." "The man you knew," he said, holding her gaze, "was a story I told myself, one I don't believe anymore." "I just don't want to see you get hurt," she whispered. "This isn't about vengeance, Rhea," he said. It's about balance, about justice. In the weeks that followed, Caleb kept up appearances, deliberately measured, calm to the point of eerie. It unsettled Jasmine and Chloe both. He was home in time for dinner, chimed in on chore discussions, even gave polite input on wedding logistics when asked. But beneath the surface, he was mobilizing. With Eli's quiet help, he began transferring funds into accounts under his sole authority. He leased an apartment across town under an alias and paid 6 months up front. He hired a private investigation firm to document Jasmine and Vincent's every move. He tracked inconsistencies and mapped them with care. He also scheduled a consultation with one of Los Angeles's most cutthroat divorce attorneys, a specialist in affairs and financial concealment. One evening, Jasmine intercepted him in the kitchen. Her tone was clipped and formal. "We need to talk about the wedding." "What about it?" he replied, stacking ingredients on a sandwich, eyes on the bread. "I think it would be best if you didn't attend." That gave him pause. "You don't want me there for Chloe's big day?" "It's not about me," she said, arms crossed. "Chloe's under a lot of pressure. Seating is complicated. Your presence makes things difficult." "Difficult how?" Jasmine's voice sharpened. "Nathaniel's family is very traditional. They expect a united front. And frankly, you don't fit the picture we're trying to present." Caleb looked up, slow and deliberate. "And Chloe? How does she feel about that?" Right then, Chloe stepped into the room. "Feel about what?" Jasmine didn't blink. "We're discussing the possibility of your father not attending the wedding." Chloe didn't bother pretending to feel guilty. "It just makes sense, Dad. You'd feel out of place anyway. And honestly, the per-person cost is pretty steep at the venue." Caleb studied the daughter he'd adored for 26 years, no blood connection necessary. The emotional vacancy in her expression landed like a punch from someone he barely knew. Still, a quiet part of him admitted it had always been there. He had simply chosen not to see it. "If that's truly what you've both decided," he said gently. A flicker of relief passed between them before their expressions settled into something closer to quiet triumph. "We'll tell everyone you're sick or away on business," Jasmine said smoothly, already laying the groundwork for the deception. "No need to spin anything," Caleb replied. "Just say I wasn't invited." Later that week, over lunch with his sister Lori, the last member of his family who hadn't fallen under Jasmine's spell, Caleb relayed the news. "They've rescinded my invitation to the wedding," he told her once their meals had been ordered. Lori's eyes flashed. "Those conniving—" He held up a hand. "Don't. Honestly, this works out." She looked at him, puzzled. "How is getting cut out of your own daughter's wedding a good thing?" Caleb leaned in and lowered his voice. "Because now I get to show up on my own terms." A faint smile touched his lips. "I've hired a videographer. He's putting together something special for the reception, a custom piece that'll run during dinner." Understanding slowly dawned in Lori's expression. "Caleb, what are you about to do?" He didn't miss a beat. "They can decorate the ceremony with all the false smiles they want. I'll be the one telling the truth." On Chloe's wedding day, the Biltmore Hotel gleamed with extravagant elegance. Grand floral arrangements filled the ballroom, and a string quartet played delicate melodies beneath the crystal chandeliers. Every detail was flawless, just as Chloe had imagined it. Outside the main doors, Caleb adjusted his tie. His suit was sharp and understated, but he wore it with quiet authority. In his jacket pocket, a USB drive weighed heavily with intent. Guests streamed past him, some faltering when they recognized him. A few offered strained nods, others averted their eyes. Caleb met them all with a composed, unreadable smile. A young staffer approached him nervously, clutching a clipboard. "Sir, I'm not seeing your name on the list." "That's because it's not there," Caleb said calmly. "I'm the bride's father." The staffer's eyes widened. "Oh, yes, of course, sir. Please go right in." The ceremony was already underway when Caleb quietly slipped into the back. He lingered by the wall, unnoticed by most. Chloe glowed in the gown he'd paid for. No one had asked him to, but he had anyway. Nathaniel, the groom, looked polished and nervous. Jasmine sat in the front row, perfectly poised in a navy gown. She didn't turn around, but the rigid set of her shoulders told him she felt his presence. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, words of forever were shared, promises Caleb knew could unravel in time. As Chloe and Nathaniel walked back down the aisle, her eyes caught his. Surprise flashed, then hardened into fury. Caleb returned her gaze with a subtle nod, his expression unreadable. During cocktail hour, Caleb stood near the edge of the room, slowly sipping a scotch. He watched the guests navigate their social theater like seasoned performers. Jasmine floated from group to group, basking in compliments, effortlessly wearing the mask of devoted mother. When dinner was announced, Caleb found his place card at a remote table on the fringe, surrounded by acquaintances and names barely remembered. It read, Caleb Morgan +1, optional. He picked it up, crossed the room, and set it firmly at the main family table, then turned and quietly returned to the distant corner where they'd assigned him. The toasts began. Nathaniel's father rose first, lifting his glass. To the bride and groom, and to their families, he said warmly. Then glancing toward Caleb, he added, especially Caleb, who seems to have been the true pillar throughout. Here's to a future filled with happiness. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jasmine stood quickly, her glass raised, her tone syrup sweet. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Chloe and Nathaniel, she said. As a mother, nothing compares to seeing your child find someone who truly values them. Her eyes darted toward Caleb. And Caleb, I hope you don't mind standing. After all, showing up was never quite your forte. Uneasy laughter flickered around the room. Caleb lifted his glass in silence, a calm smile resting on his lips. The bait had been taken. All that remained was the reveal. As dinner ended and the cake awaited its moment, Caleb caught the DJ's attention and offered a slight nod. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced, before we cut the cake, we have a special video prepared by the bride's father. Let's dim the lights and enjoy. The screen lit up. It opened innocently. Childhood photos of Chloe, snapshots of vacations, birthday candles, happy moments. Jasmine's shoulders visibly relaxed. But the video was only just beginning to change. A notification blinked across the phone screen. Jasmine, he's gone for the weekend. Same spot, same time. Seconds later, another message appeared. Vincent. Counting the seconds, Jasmine's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Do you think he suspects anything? Caleb, please. He's drowning in work. He wouldn't notice a fire in the house. A sharp gasp swept through the gathering like a wave. Chloe shot up, her face ghost pale. Shut it off, she yelled, but the video kept playing, relentless. Bank statements filled the screen, cash withdrawals, luxury hotel receipts. Then the photos came. Jasmine and Vincent at dinner, boarding flights, wrapped in stolen moments of affection. A timeline followed. Texts spanning years, each one a fresh betrayal. The final blow came with black and white DNA results filling the screen. The room hummed with quiet horror as the truth settled like a thunderclap. The last slide appeared, stark and final. You lied. You cheated. You stole. Now I repay you with truth. Caleb Morgan is not your father. Darkness swallowed the screen. Silence followed like a curtain falling. Then chaos erupted. Nathaniel turned to Chloe, disbelief etched into his features. What the hell is this? You knew about your mom and said nothing? Chloe's gaze bounced between Nathaniel and her mother. I can explain. Nathaniel's father shoved his chair back, rage painting his face crimson. Who the hell is Vincent Langley? As if summoned, A tall man in an expensive suit stood from the crowd, Vincent himself, the family friend in plain sight all along. Nathaniel vaulted over the table, landing a fist squarely on Vincent's jaw. The crack of contact echoed through the hall. Security rushed in. Guests screamed. The fairy tale wedding collapsed in an instant. Amid the uproar, Caleb remained seated, unmoving. He watched as the truth he had borne in silence detonated across the room. Nathaniel's family stormed out, dragging a tide of guests with them. The rest huddled in stunned clusters. Arden, the planner, sat sobbing uncontrollably nearby. Chloe stood frozen in the center, mascara streaked down her face, shrieking at her mother. "You swore he'd never find out!" Jasmine grabbed her arm and hissed, "Keep your voice down, we can fix this." "Fix it?" Chloe's voice cracked, raw. "My wedding's destroyed. Nathaniel won't even look at me. His family thinks I'm filth." Caleb rose and walked toward the exit, his pace calm, unhurried. His part was done. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the weight of long-buried truth finally made visible. Jasmine stepped into his path, eyes blazing. "You spineless bastard," she spat. "You think this changes anything? You think people respect you now?" Caleb looked at her as if seeing a stranger. The warmth her face once held was gone, eroded by lies and deceit. "This wasn't about them," he said, voice low. "It was about me." "You'll pay for this," she hissed. "I'll make sure of it." He gave her a faint, almost weary smile. "I already did. That's why I'm done." And with that, he stepped into the night air, leaving behind a ruined celebration and walking toward a life, at last, built on truth. The following morning, a courier knocked on Jasmine's hotel door with an envelope. Inside, divorce papers. The charges included financial fraud, identity deception, and chronic infidelity. A judge froze every joint account pending a full audit. At the same time, Caleb's attorney filed changes to his will. Chloe's name was removed entirely. A trust for her future children remained, but only with strict conditions and zero direct control. That same afternoon, Caleb settled into a small apartment across town. Lori helped carry in the last of the boxes. The space was uncluttered, sunlit, everything his former home had never been. "You getting used to it?" Lori asked, nudging a box into place. "More than I ever thought possible," Caleb said, and he meant every word. His phone buzzed again and again, Chloe's name flashing on the screen. He flipped it over without reading. Whatever apology she had come up with, it was far too late. Around noon, Rhea showed up with takeout. "Thought you could use a warm meal," she said, setting bags on the counter, "and maybe a friend." "Appreciate it," Caleb said, fishing out plates from a box still half unpacked. "It's all over the news," Rhea said. "Apparently Vincent's wife turned up at your place this morning. Seems she didn't know either." Caleb just shook his head and exhaled slowly. Collateral damage. He hated acknowledging it. Yet Rhea had reminded him that even she deserved the truth. In fact, they all did, no exceptions. After the dust settled, Caleb constructed a new cadence for his life. He went to the office regularly. He dedicated himself to his workouts at a new gym. Twice a week, he sat down to dinner with Rhea. He kept in close contact with his attorney as the divorce process continued. And when Jasmine or Chloe called or texted, sometimes relentlessly, he ignored them. Their unraveling was no longer his responsibility. Then one evening, unexpectedly, his doorbell rang. When he opened the door, Chloe stood there. Her skin was pale, her eyes tired and tight. "Can I come in?" she asked, barely audible. Caleb studied her in silence, his face unreadable. "No." She blinked, caught off guard. "Dad, please, I need to tell you what happened." "There's nothing left to clarify," he said evenly, his voice calm but final. "You made your choices. So did I." "She tricked me," Chloe said quickly, emotion leaking into her voice. "Mom twisted everything. Made me believe. Enough, he interrupted, raising a hand. You're not a child anymore. You knew exactly what you were doing. He saw her recoil slightly, but he kept going. Every time you covered for her, every insult you threw my way, every time you came to me for help and laughed about it later. Tears rolled down her face now. What about Nathaniel? His parents won't even speak to me. The wedding's off. That's between you and him. I don't have anywhere to stay. Mom's falling apart. The house isn't my concern anymore, Caleb replied, finishing the sentence she hadn't dared to say. And neither are you. Goodbye, Chloe. He closed the door, not with force but with certainty. Then he leaned his back against it, listening to her quiet sobs fading into the corridor. When the hallway finally went silent, he returned to his chair and picked up his book. The ache inside him hadn't vanished. It was real, it was deep, but it no longer controlled him. True to form, Jasmine tried to stage a comeback. Tearful interviews painted her as the abandoned wife of a disturbed man who had tarnished their legacy. But it was too late. The footage had already made the rounds, even catching fire among wedding forums. Too many had seen the truth play out with their own eyes. Her carefully crafted public image collapsed under the weight of her own lies. 1 year later, Caleb stood behind a sleek podium at a prestigious aerospace engineering conference. He was delivering the keynote address, and the turnout had surpassed expectations. Extra seating had to be added just to accommodate the overflow. After wrapping up his talk on next-gen spacecraft materials, he allowed himself a brief pause, then added a personal note. If engineering teaches us one fundamental principle, he said, steady and sure, it's this: honor the foundation. No matter how stunning the design, if the base is unstable, the whole thing falls. He let that sit for a moment, letting his words settle into the stillness. His gaze moved across the sea of listeners. In the third row, Rhea watched with quiet pride. Life works the same way, he continued. Collapse doesn't always come in a flash. Sometimes it takes years. But when you rebuild, really rebuild, you don't do it with sentiment. You use steel. You build something that holds, not because it dazzles, but because it lasts. The crowd erupted in applause. As Caleb stepped away from the microphone, a stream of peers surged forward to greet him, eager to connect. He shook every hand, fully present with each interaction, something he hadn't been capable of back when he was still living under the illusion of normalcy. Later that night, walking beside Rhea on their way to dinner, they passed a wedding venue. On the steps, a couple posed for photos, lost in their own joy. The bride threw her head back in laughter, her veil catching the breeze. The groom watched her like she was the only light in his universe. Caleb paused, not out of bitterness, not out of sorrow, just a quiet recognition of how beautiful and breakable those moments could be. You happy? Rhea asked, catching the direction of his gaze. No, he replied gently. I'm content. That's better. He offered a small smile, not mourning what had slipped away, but appreciating all that had taken its place. Then he turned back to the sidewalk and walked on, firmly rooted in the life he had rebuilt for himself. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.